palm cracked across a man's jaw inside a hall of 200 wolves. The slap echoed off marble columns. Silver candelabras shivered. The sound traveled up the vaulted ceiling and came back down like a second blow. No one moved. No one breathed. Two enforcers behind the woman froze with their gauntlets half raised. The High Council on the dais turned to stone. A goblet of dark wine, held by an old beta in the front row, tilted and spilled across his sleeve. He did not even notice. Every eye in that hall went to one place. The cheekbone of the man on the throne. The Alpha King. Her name was Selene Marsh. She was 29 years old. She had been dragged here in chains. And before he could answer, before the guards could lunge, she said 6 words that would change everything in the kingdom. Stay with me on this one. 6 years before that slap, Selene Marsh had walked out of a stone gate and into a city that did not believe in wolves. She left behind a name she would not speak again. She left behind a mother buried under cold earth. She left behind a bloodline so old that the elders of the Northern Pack had bowed when she walked past them as a young woman. None of that mattered in the human world. In the human world, she was a server in a diner on the edge of a steel town. She wore a name tag that said Lena. She wore black sneakers that squeaked on tile. She lived in a one-room apartment above a laundromat. The dryer vents puffed warm air under her window in winter. Some nights that was the only comfort she had. She worked the late shift because the late shift paid better. Truckers came in at 2 in the morning. Drunks came in at 3. The cook in the back played old country songs on a cracked radio. Selene learned to pour coffee without spilling. She learned to smile without meaning it. She learned to mask the scent of her own blood with cheap perfume and a salve she bought from a Romany woman at a market 2 states away. The salve dulled her wolf. The salve made her ordinary. Some nights she stood in front of the bathroom mirror and pressed her palms against the glass and watched her eyes stay human. That was the goal. To stay human. To stay invisible. To stay alive. For 6 years it worked. For 6 years no enforcer found her. She moved twice. She changed her hair. She paid in cash. She never let a man walk her home. She never let a friend get close enough to ask the wrong question. She read the local paper for missing person reports. She read the wolf forums on a burner laptop she kept under a floorboard. She knew the Northern Pack still searched for her. She knew the throne hall still kept her old room sealed. She knew her name was on a list. She was an Omega from a royal line, and she had run. In wolf law, that was a crime older than the gates. Then on a Tuesday in October, she came home from her shift, and 3 men were standing in her kitchen. They did not knock. They did not speak. One of them held up a parchment with a black seal. The other 2 held silver cuffs. The cuffs were the kind that burned an Omega's wrist and dulled the wolf inside her down to a whimper. Selene set down her keys. She set down her bag of leftover bread. She looked at the parchment, and she did not need to read it. She knew the seal. The crown above the crossed claws. The mark of the throne hall. The mark of the Alpha King himself. She did not run. She had run enough. She held out her wrists, and she let them lock the cuffs on. The metal hissed against her skin, and she did not flinch. One of the enforcers tried to look her in the eye. She let him. She wanted him to remember. She wanted him to tell whoever sent him that the Omega Selene Marsh did not beg. The drive to the gate took 2 days. They drove at night. They stopped only for fuel. They fed her cold sandwiches through a slot in the back of the van. She did not eat. She did not sleep. She watched the highway lights slide across the ceiling, and she practiced the only thing she had left. She practiced not being afraid. The gate of the Northern Throne Hall opened at dawn on the 3rd day. Selene was pulled out of the van by her elbows. Her legs nearly gave out. The enforcers held her up. She refused to be held. She shook them off. She walked the last 100 yards on her own feet. The courtyard was packed with wolves in formal dress. Word had traveled. The runaway Omega had been found. The fated of the Alpha King had been brought home. They lined the path and they stared. Some of them dipped their heads. Some of them sneered. Selene kept her eyes on the great oak doors at the end of the path. The doors swung open. She walked inside. The throne hall had not changed. The marble was the same cold gray. The columns were the same 6 wide. The banners of the 7 packs still hung from the rafters. The chandelier of antler and iron still cast that same low yellow light. And at the far end, on a throne carved from a single black trunk of bog oak, sat a man she had never seen before. He was tall even sitting down. His shoulders were wide. His hair was dark and long and pulled back in a leather cord. His face was hard but not cruel. He wore no crown. He wore a plain black coat with silver at the collar. His hands rested flat on the arms of the throne. He watched her cross the hall, and he did not blink. Behind him on the dais stood the High Council. 12 old wolves in long robes. Selene knew 3 of them by face. They had served her father. They had eaten at her mother's table. They looked at her now like she was a stranger. The enforcers led her to the foot of the dais. The herald struck the marble with a staff. The herald announced her name in the old tongue. Selene Marsh of the Northern Line. Daughter of Uldra Marsh. Fated of the Alpha King Kael Drassen. Return her to the throne. The hall murmured. The murmur grew. The Alpha King raised one finger. The murmur stopped. He spoke. His voice was low and even. He said, "Kneel." That was the word. One word. Kneel. Selene Marsh did not kneel. She walked up the 3 steps of the dais. She walked past the herald. She walked past the closest counselor. She walked up to the throne until she could smell the cedar oil in his hair. Then she lifted her hand. 2 enforcers stepped forward. The Alpha King raised that same finger again. They stopped. Selene drew her hand back, and she slapped him across the cheekbone with everything she had. The hall went still. That was the moment. 200 wolves, and not one of them breathed. The slap left a red print on his face. He did not touch it. He did not move. He looked at her with steady gray eyes, and he said the 6 words that froze the room. He said, "I have waited 6 years." The hall did not move. He said it again, softer. "I have waited 6 years." Then he said, "Sit beside me. We will talk." Selene did not sit. Not yet. She stood there with her chest rising and falling, and the silver cuff still hot on her wrists. She said, "I am not your mate." She said it loud enough for the back row to hear. She said, "You do not own me." She said, "I came here in chains." That is not a bond. That is a kidnapping. The council shifted on the dais. One of the older wolves opened his mouth to speak. The Alpha King held up his hand, and the old wolf closed his mouth. The Alpha King stood. He was a full head taller than her. He did not loom. He simply stood. He said, "The cuffs come off." Now, a captain of the guard moved forward and unlocked the silver. The cuffs fell to the marble with a clatter. Selene rubbed her wrists. The skin was raw and red. The Alpha King looked at her wrists, and something tightened in his jaw. He said, "Who put those on her?" The captain answered, "The enforcers, my king, on the order of the council." The Alpha King turned his head slightly toward the dais. He did not raise his voice. He said, "The council does not give orders about her." Ever. 3 of the old wolves bowed their heads. One did not. Selene noticed which one. The Alpha King turned back to her. He said, "You have every right to be angry." He said, 6 years is a long time. He said, "I will not ask you to kneel today. I will not ask you to kneel ever. But I will ask you to stay 1 week. Hear what I have to say. Eat at this table. Sleep in a room with a key only you carry. If at the end of the week you still wish to leave, I will open the gate myself and walk you to it." He said, "You have my word as Alpha." he said, and my word is a thing I have not broken. Selene looked at him for a long time. She looked at the red mark she had left on his face. She looked at the council. She looked at the 200 wolves in the hall behind her. She did not trust him. She did not trust any of them. But she was tired. She was so tired. She said, 1 week. She said, and a key only I carry. He nodded once. He gestured to a woman in a gray dress at the side of the hall. The woman stepped forward and curtsied. Her name was Myra. She would be Selene's attendant. Selene followed her out of the hall. The Alpha King watched her go. He did not sit down again until the doors closed behind her. That night Selene slept in a room 3 floors above the courtyard. The bed was wide and soft. The sheets smelled of lavender and clean wool. There was a fire in the hearth and a tray of warm bread and broth on the table. She did not eat. She locked the door with the heavy iron key Myra had given her. She tested the windows. They opened. She measured the drop to the roof below. 12 feet. She could make it if she had to. She lay down on the bed in her clothes. She did not sleep. She listened to the hall outside. Footsteps passed. Footsteps stopped. Footsteps went on. No one tried her door. No one even came close. Round 3 in the morning, she finally let her eyes close. For 3 days she barely spoke. She walked the gardens. She read in the library. She ate alone in her room. The Alpha King did not summon her. He did not appear in her doorway. He sent her one short note on the 2nd day. The note said only, "The kitchens are yours. Myra will show you." He had remembered. He had remembered that she had loved to bake when she was younger. Selene stood at her window holding that note, and she did not know what to do with the feeling in her chest. She crumpled the note. Then she smoothed it out. Then she folded it and put it in the drawer beside the bed. She told herself it meant nothing. On the 4th day, he asked her to walk with him in the orchard. She said yes before she could stop herself. The orchard was old. The apple trees were heavy with late fruit. The grass was wet from the morning rain. He walked beside her with his hands behind his back. He did not touch her. He did not stand too close. He told her about the kingdom. He told her about the drought in the Eastern Pack. He told her about the trade route they were trying to open with the river clans. He asked her about the diner, about the steel town, about the cook with the cracked radio. He listened when she answered. He laughed once, low and surprised, when she described a drunk trucker who had tried to tip her in fishing lures. By the 5th day she was laughing too. By the 6th day she was eating in the great hall at his table. By the 7th day the kingdom had announced a banquet. A banquet to celebrate the bond. Selene did not protest. She was not sure why. Myra braided her hair with thin silver wire. Myra clasped a dress of deep green silk at her shoulder. Selene looked at herself in the long mirror, and for a moment she did not recognize the woman looking back. The woman looked rested. The woman looked almost happy. The banquet hall glowed. 100 candles in tall iron stands. Long tables covered in white linen. Roast venison on silver platters. Honey cakes. Mulled wine in copper pitchers. Musicians in the gallery playing a slow tune on fiddle and pipe. Selene sat at the high table beside the Alpha King. The council sat in a row to her left. The captains of the 7 packs sat below. Wolves she had not seen in years came up to greet her. An old aunt of her mother's kissed her cheek and wept. A young man who had once stolen her wooden horse now stood as a captain of the guard, and bowed so low his forehead nearly touched the table. Selene laughed. She actually laughed. She had not laughed in a room full of wolves in 6 years. The Alpha King watched her laugh, and his eyes softened in a way she had not seen before. He leaned over and said something quiet about the fiddler being half drunk. She laughed again. She lifted her goblet to drink. And in the middle of that laugh, in the middle of that warm, bright hall, a goblet shattered on the marble at the far end of the room. The fiddler stopped. The room turned. A beta in a brown coat had dropped his cup. He stood swaying on his feet. He was old. His hair was thin and white. His eyes were wet and fixed on Selene. He pointed at her with a shaking hand. He did not speak loudly. He spoke just loudly enough to carry in the sudden quiet. He said one word. He said the name her mother had whispered to her on her deathbed. He said the name no one in this hall was supposed to know. He said her birth name. Not Selene. Not Lena. The other one. The hidden one. Selene felt the room tilt. Her hand went cold around the goblet. The Alpha King went very still beside her. She turned her head slowly to look at him. His face had changed. The softness was gone. Something hard had moved in behind his eyes. Something that had been waiting. She understood then in one terrible flash that he had known. He had known her birth name. He had known what it meant. He had known why she had been hidden. And he had not told her. She set the goblet down. The wine inside it shook. She said, "You knew." She said it under the music that had started up again, under the slow return of voices around them. She said, "You knew the whole time." He did not lie. He said, "Yes." She said, "Then why now? Why drag me back now and not 6 years ago?" She said it through her teeth. He looked at her, and the answer in his eyes was the worst answer of all. The answer was that something was coming. Something bad. And he had needed her here when it arrived. He opened his mouth. He started to speak. The doors at the far end of the banquet hall slammed open. A guard staggered in with blood down the front of his tunic. The fiddle stopped. The room stood up as one. The guard fell to one knee. He said 3 words. He said, "The gate is breached." The hall emptied in under a minute. Captains called for their seconds. Wolves shed their banquet coats for leather and steel. Selene stood at the high table with her hand still on the cold stem of her goblet. The Alpha King was already on his feet. He was already calling for his sword. He turned to her once. He said, "Stay in the inner keep." He said, "Please." She did not answer him. She did not look at him. She walked past him and out the side door. Myra tried to stop her. Selene shook her off. She went to her room. She took off the silk dress. She put on the trousers and the leather coat Myra had hung in the closet. She braided her own hair without the silver wire. She came back down the stairs. The Alpha King was in the courtyard. He had his sword. He had a black cloak. He had 40 wolves around him in a half circle. He saw her come out of the door, and his face did 3 things at once. Relief. Worry. Something almost like fear. He said, "I asked you to stay inside." She said, "You do not get to ask me anything tonight." She said, "What is at the gate?" He hesitated. The old counselor she had noticed in the throne hall on the first day stepped forward to answer for him. The old counselor's name was Boric. Boric said, "The southern pack has crossed the river. They have killed the gate watch. They are 40 strong inside the outer wall already. They are coming for the throne." Selene laughed. It was not a kind laugh. She said, "Of course they are." She said, "And you needed me here because I am the only living daughter of the northern line." She said, "And the southern pack has been waiting 6 years for a chance to take this throne while it was weak." She said, "Am I close?" Boric looked at the ground. The Alpha King looked at her and said, "You are close." She said, "Then give me a sword. If you're still with me, hit that subscribe button. Stay with me. Because what happens in the next hour decides everything." 2 of the captains protested. One counselor said it was unheard of. Selene took a sword off the rack beside the courtyard well. She tested the weight. It was a working blade, not a ceremonial one. "Good," she said. "I have not used one of these in 8 years." She said, "But I was trained by my mother, and my mother was trained by hers, and the southern pack should remember what that meant." She said, "Where do you want me?" The Alpha King looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "Beside me." The captains made a path. She walked through them. She took her place at his left shoulder. The 40 wolves around them shifted into formation. The gate of the courtyard opened. The first Southern fighter came through with a war axe and a shouted oath. He died before he finished the oath. Seleni's sword caught him at the collarbone. The Alpha Kings caught him at the ribs. They moved together as if they had trained for a year. They had never fought together a day in their lives. The next wave came in 3 deep. Selene fell into a rhythm she thought she had forgotten. Step, cut, step, block, step, cut. Her wolf, dulled for 6 years by salve and city air, woke up inside her chest with a low growl that shook her teeth. She did not shift. She did not need to. The blade was enough. In the middle of the fight, she saw what the Alpha King had not told her. She saw the leader of the Southern pack come through the gate. He was a tall, lean man with a scar down his jaw. She had seen that scar before. In a portrait. In a hall she had not entered since she was 22. He was her cousin. Her father's brother's son. Roan Marsh. The man who had killed her mother and made it look like a fever. Roan saw her at the same moment she saw him. He smiled. He raised a curved blade, and he came at her through the press of bodies. He did not come for the Alpha King. He came for her. The Alpha King saw it. He stepped between them. Roan's blade caught him across the shoulder. Blood went down the black coat. The Alpha King did not fall. He cut Roan's wrist almost to the bone. Roan screamed. He dropped the curved blade. He went for a hidden knife in his boot. Selene was already there. She did not give him the chance. She put her sword through the meat of his thigh and twisted. She did not kill him. She would not give him that. She put her boot on his chest, and she pinned him to the marble of the courtyard. She said, "You killed my mother." He looked up at her with a face full of hate and pain. He said, "Your mother was a traitor." She said, "My mother was a queen." She said, "You will live." She said, "You will live so that every dawn for the rest of your life you remember which one of us was on the floor." The fight broke around them. The Southern wolves saw their leader pinned. Some ran. Some dropped their weapons. The Alpha King's captains rounded them up and took them in chains. The courtyard smelled of blood and rain and pine smoke. Selene took her boot off Roan's chest. 2 guards dragged him away. She turned, and the Alpha King was looking at her. He was bleeding. He was leaning. He was still standing. He said, "I should have told you." She said, "Yes. You should have." He said, "I was afraid." She said, "Of what?" He said, "That you would run again." She said, "I might have." She said, "But you should have told me anyway." He nodded once. He said, "I will tell you everything from now on." She said, "I know." She walked to him. She lifted her hand to his face. He flinched just a little. He thought she might slap him again. She did not. She put her palm flat against his cheekbone, where the red mark had been a week ago. She said, "Sit down before you fall down." She said, "Your shoulder is bleeding through your coat." She said, "Where is the healer?" He laughed once, low and surprised. He let her lead him to the steps of the keep. He sat. The healer came running. Selene stayed beside him while the healer worked. She did not leave the courtyard until dawn. The kingdom did not have a wedding. The kingdom had a coronation. 2 thrones now on the dais. Selene's hair was braided with the silver wire of the Northern Line, the way her mother had worn it, the way her grandmother had worn it. The Alpha King stood beside her. His shoulder was healed, but a scar would stay. He said his vows in the old tongue. She said hers in plain words. She said, "I will not kneel for you." She said, "I will not kneel for any wolf living." She said, "But I will stand beside you." She said, "And I will not run again." The hall did not gasp. The hall did not murmur. The hall stood and put a fist over its heart, 200 wolves in one slow beat, and that was her crown. Boric, the old counselor who had ordered the silver cuffs, knelt before the throne and offered his neck. It was the old way. Selene looked down at him for a long time. She said, "Stand up, old man." She said, "You served my father." She said, "You will serve me too, and you will do it without chains." He stood. He wept. He did not speak again that day. The other council members fell in line behind him. The Southern Pack was given new captains and a new charter. Roan Marsh was sent to the iron mines under the eastern mountains. He would live a long life. He would live every day of it underground. Selene did not move into the royal chambers right away. She kept her old room with a heavy iron key for a full month. She wanted to. She needed to know the door was hers. The Alpha King did not ask her to hurry. He waited. On the night she finally came down the hall with her small bag and her one folded dress and the crumpled note about the kitchens, he opened the door himself. He did not speak. He took the bag. He set it on a chair. He stood back. He let her walk the room. He let her test the windows. The windows opened. The drop was farther this time, but she could still make it if she had to. She did not say so out loud. He knew. He had chosen the room because of it. Myra stayed as her chief attendant. The diner in the steel town never knew what happened to Lena. A new server took her shifts. The cook played the same cracked radio for another 6 years. Selene sent the diner an envelope once, with no return address, with enough cash inside to fix the dryer vents in the apartment above the laundromat, so the next tenant would have warm air under the window in winter. She did not sign the envelope. She did not need to. She baked bread in the royal kitchens on Sunday mornings. She wore an apron over a plain wool dress. The cooks at first did not know where to look. After a month, they handed her flour without bowing. After 2 months, they argued with her about the oven temperature. After 3 months, one of the younger cooks called her a name only old friends used, and then went white at her own boldness. Selene laughed. She said, "Do it again tomorrow." The cook did. The kitchens of the throne hall were the warmest place in the kingdom that winter, and the bread was good. On the first anniversary of the slap, the Alpha King stood with her on the balcony above the courtyard. The kingdom was at peace. The eastern drought had broken. The river clans had signed a trade route. The council had not given a single unauthorized order in a year. He took her hand. He did not pull. He just held it. He said, "Do you regret coming back?" She thought about the question for a long time. She watched the torches in the courtyard below. She watched 2 young guards laughing at some joke she could not hear. She said no. She said, "I regret leaving." She said, "But I had to leave so I could come back like this." He nodded. He understood. He always did. She did not slap him again. She did not need to. The hall remembered. The kingdom remembered. The story of the Omega who slapped the Alpha King on the day she came home, and of the king who answered with 6 quiet words, was told in every pack from the river clans to the iron mines. Mothers told it to daughters. Fathers told it to sons. And in the telling, the lesson was not about the slap. The lesson was about what came after. About the week. About the orchard. About the banquet. About the breached gate. About the choice to stay. Selene Marsh lived a long life. She wore the silver of the northern line until her hair went the same color as the wire. She buried Boric. She buried 2 old captains. She watched the Alpha King's shoulder ache in cold weather, and she rubbed liniment into the scar with her own hands. She never knelt. Not for him. Not for anyone. And when the next runaway Omega came through the gate of the Northern Throne Hall in chains, 20 years on, it was Selene who walked down to the courtyard herself, who unlocked the cuffs with her own key, and who said the 6 words she had once been told. "I have waited. Sit. We will talk." That was the kingdom she built. Not on a slab. Not on a throne. on the choice to stay, and on the truth told late but told all the way. If this story moved you, leave a comment with the word stay. I read every one of them. And I will see you in the next story.